I'd been a ship navigator for 15 years, charting routes through wormholes, skirting neutron stars, mapping jump points that most pilots wouldn't dare touch. I'd seen the colors of gas clouds swirl like living paintings, and I'd felt the silence of space press down so hard it made my ears ring. But nothing, and I mean nothing, made me uneasy the way the edge of the Galactic map did. Every chart, from the pirate scrap maps on backwater moons to the shimmering holograms in fleet headquarters, had the same abrupt cut. Beyond a certain point, the stars just stopped. The grid went black. No trade routes, no survey data, no mining claims, just a hard, cold void marked with a single warning. Unmapped. Human territory. The first time I saw it, I laughed. Thought it was some bureaucratic glitch, a chunk of space no one cared to bother with. But veterans, real veterans, men with faces carved by radiation burns and decades of shipboard living, didn't laugh. They told me to never, ever plot a course past it. Of course, telling a navigator not to look past a line is like telling a thirsty man not to drink. So I started asking questions. That's when the looks changed. Friendly chatter died the moment I brought it up. In bars from Draven's Rock to Epsilon Station, the answer was the same. Silence. Sometimes a muttered "don't" from a man staring into his glass. Sometimes just a hard stare until I shut my mouth. By the time I hit my 12th year in navigation, I'd picked up bits and pieces. Not facts. Never facts. Just stories. They all carried the same weight. Merchant vessels that ignored the warnings and never returned. Alien exploration fleets, whole fleets, going dark without a distress ping. One drunken freighter captain swore he'd seen a ship come back from there once, said the hull was pitted with scorch marks no weapon in the galaxy could make, and the crew, well, they weren't right anymore. He didn't finish the story before he passed out. Still, I couldn't let it go. That black patch on the map gnawed at me. The rest of the galaxy bustled with trade lanes, war zones, colonies. But human space? It was like someone had draped a funeral shroud over it. Now, don't mistake this for some kind of alien xenophobia. I'd worked alongside all sorts. Terrans, with their crystal skin and echoing voices. The Cathera, whose blood smelled like burnt copper. Even the Voran mercenaries who'd kill you as easily as look at you. The galaxy was big, dangerous, and full of things stranger than anything you'd find in a human city. But this was different. This was fear. Real fear. I finally got my chance to test it when Captain Roden took me on as chief navigator aboard the Iron Wraith. Roden was old school, ran guns to outlaw colonies, took contracts the fleet wouldn't touch. The kind of man who didn't scare easy. We were hauling contraband shielding to the outer rim when a client offered double the pay for a delivery past the mapped line. Roden didn't even blink, just said no, and told me to wipe the coordinates from my terminal. That night, while the ship drifted in a dead zone for a stealth transfer, I pulled up the file he'd deleted. It wasn't just coordinates. It was a course, a way straight into the black. And the system at the end had a name, one that made my chest tighten. Earth. I'd heard of it before, sure. Every spacer had. Birthplace of humanity, long abandoned, or destroyed, or hidden. The stories changed depending on who you asked. Some said humans left it behind when they spread to the stars. Others claimed they never left at all, and they didn't want company. 2 days later, we were in deep space when I caught Roden staring at the navigation charts. His hand hovered just over the edge of the mapped zone, like he could feel the gravity of it. He saw me watching and said quietly, "Kid, you don't cross into human space unless you've got a death wish." I wanted to ask why. I wanted to demand the truth. But before I could speak, the comm crackled. A distress signal. faint but unmistakably coming from inside the unmapped void. And that was the moment I knew I was going to cross the line. The Iron Wraith was never built for heroics. She was a smuggler's ship, a lean dagger of steel and black plating, designed to slip through fleet patrols and pirate traps alike. The engines purred under my boots like a caged beast, always ready to burn hard and disappear into the dark. We lived on quiet deals and quick exits, not on answering unknown distress calls, which was why the bridge went silent when that signal came through. It was faint, weak enough that most navigational sweeps would have missed it entirely. But I was scanning deeper than protocol, curious about the uncharted coordinates, and the distress ping flashed across my console like a dying heartbeat. I isolated the frequency. It was an old pattern, older than the Wraith, older than the fleet itself. The kind of emergency code used when ships ran on chemical thrusters and breathable air was the only thing keeping you alive. Roden leaned over my chair, his shadow falling across my screen. Where? I hesitated. Inside the line. He didn't need me to clarify. His jaw tightened. His eyes went cold. For a long moment he just stood there, the low hum of the ship the only sound between us. Then he straightened. Erase it. I glanced up at him. Captain, I said erase it. We're not going there. It wasn't just a refusal. It was a final command. But the thing about Roden was, he didn't order twice unless he wanted to make an example out of someone. He trusted me enough to let it drop. Which was his mistake. I didn't erase it. The rest of the crew didn't even notice the exchange. Merrick, the weapons officer, was cleaning his railgun housing in the corner, muttering to himself. Norin, our comms man, was busy slicing into a customs database to falsify our cargo. The Wraith thrummed forward through empty space like nothing had happened. But I kept that signal buried in my system's buffer, tucked away where Roden's command overrides wouldn't find it. I told myself it was curiosity, professional curiosity, a navigator's itch to chart what no one else would. But there was something about the voice buried in that static, a crackle of desperation under the coded pulse, that wouldn't let go of me. By the time my next bridge shift came, I'd already mapped the course in my head. The line on the star chart wasn't a wall. It was just an absence. And absence could be crossed. I caught Roden alone, later in the mess. He was nursing a mug of something dark and strong, the kind of brew that could burn the paint off a bulkhead. His eyes flicked up when I sat down across from him. You're still thinking about it, he said flatly. You don't even know what's out there, I shot back. Could be a ship, could be survivors, could be salvage, could be a graveyard. You ever been past the line? His silence was my answer, but it wasn't the silence of ignorance. It was the silence of a man who knew more than he wanted to say. I've seen ships go, he said finally, voice low. Good ships, crews you could bet your life on. They didn't come back. Pirates? Hostiles? Worse. That was all he gave me before finishing his drink and walking out. The signal pulsed again, 2 shifts later. Fainter this time, like the sender was slipping closer to the edge of whatever final darkness waited for them. I stared at the coordinates until my eyes burned. Then I set the Wraith's course toward them. It wasn't a hard decision. Not really. I'd flown through pirate sieges, slipped past alien war zones, navigated asteroid fields that chewed up capital ships. This was just another unknown. I didn't tell Roden, not right away. The ship responded to my input with a low vibration as the engines spooled up, altering our heading by less than 2 degrees, small enough not to trigger alarms. We were already in deep space, a void so empty that the stars hung like scattered diamonds with nothing between them. The shift in course wouldn't show on the nav HUD for another hour. By then, We'd be well inside the mapped edge. The crew felt it before they saw it. Merrick stopped mid-sentence during a story about some gunfight on Charon's Gate and frowned at the bulkhead. "Feels different," he muttered. Different was putting it lightly. Space has a kind of background hum, not sound exactly, but a pressure in your bones from the constant radiation, the endless wash of signals bouncing between stations, ships, and relays. As we moved deeper, that hum faded. One by one, the beacons and network pings dropped off the comm display until only the ship's own systems whispered in my ears. By the time Roden noticed the course deviation, we were already across. He stormed onto the bridge, Merrick on his heels. "What the hell did you do?" I didn't look up from my console. "We're answering the call." "You turned us into a tomb ship," he growled. "Cut the engines, plot a return." "Too late." He froze at my tone. I wasn't trying to be defiant, just honest. "If we turn around now, we'll drift blind until the drive burns out. The nav relays don't reach here. You want to find our way back? We'll need a fixed point to plot from." His stare was cold enough to chill vacuum. "And you think that signal is your fixed point?" "It's our only one." For a moment, I thought he might actually draw his sidearm. Then he swore under his breath and dropped into the captain's chair. "Fine. But when this turns to hell, you own it." The void here was wrong. You'd think uncharted space would look the same as any other patch of the galaxy. Black void, stars, maybe a nebula if you're lucky. But the further we went, the more the light changed. The stars ahead of us looked sharper somehow, too bright against a darkness so deep it felt physical. Norin kept scanning the band for comm chatter, but there was nothing. Not even the faint cosmic background hiss you'd expect. It was as if we were moving through a bubble of silence. 3 hours in, Merrick reported a contact. At first I thought he was mistaken. There was no way something could approach without us picking it up earlier. But the scope didn't lie. It wasn't approaching us. We were approaching it. A ship. Or what had once been one. The hull was shattered along its midsection, like some great invisible hand had crushed it in a single motion. The metal bent inward, jagged edges glinting in the faint light of distant stars. Parts of it floated free. A broken antenna array, what looked like a weapons turret, a section of cargo hold spinning slowly end over end. We matched speed and drifted closer. There were no markings, no registry, no faction emblem, no serial tags. It was as if whoever owned it wanted no one to know. "Life signs?" Roden asked. Norin shook his head. "Dead. All dead." "Boarding party?" Merrick's voice was hopeful. Salvage meant pay. But Roden just stared at the wreck for a long moment. "Number, we move on." Something in his tone made Merrick drop it. I kept us on course toward the distress signal. Whatever had killed that ship had done it fast. Too fast for an escape pod launch, too fast for a mayday. The broken vessel was a warning, hanging in the void like a gutted carcass. The signal grew stronger. It was broadcasting from a single point source, low orbit around a planet I'd never seen on any chart. At first glance, it was beautiful. A blue-green world with white cloud swirls, floating in the void like a jewel. But as we descended through the upper atmosphere, the beauty turned cold. There were no lights on the surface, no cities, no signs of industry or habitation. Just endless stretches of ocean and land covered in dark forests and jagged mountains. We tracked the signal to the remains of a space station, half collapsed, hanging like a skeletal crown above the planet's equator. Its rotation was slow and irregular, the result of decades, maybe centuries, without maintenance. I brought the Wraith alongside. The docking clamps groaned as they connected. The moment the seals held, A faint vibration ran through the hull, a strange, almost organic pulse, like the station itself was breathing. The airlock cycled with a hiss. Merrick went in first, railgun at the ready, followed by me and Norin. Roden stayed aboard, muttering something about not walking into graves without a good reason. Inside, the station was dark. Not the kind of dark you get from power failure, but the kind that feels deliberate, as if light had been driven out. My helmet lamp barely cut through it. We followed the signal deeper into the main hub. The corridors were empty, silent except for the faint groan of ancient metal under stress. Then we found them. Bodies, dozens of them, floating in zero-G where the artificial gravity had failed long ago. Some were skeletal, others still had flesh, pale and waxy, preserved by the cold, and they were all human. Not just humanoid, human. Flesh like mine, faces like mine. Eyes wide open, mouths frozen in silent screams. Norin swore under his breath. Merrick muttered something about ghosts, but I kept moving toward the source of the distress signal. It came from the command deck. The console was ancient, covered in dust. The signal emitter was still active, powered by some redundant core that refused to die. When I approached, a flicker of static passed through the room's speakers, then a voice. "If anyone can hear this, do not come closer. They are still here." The transmission cut off, replaced by silence so heavy it pressed against my chest. And then, from somewhere deep in the station, something moved. You could hear it over the comms, the faint, deliberate scrape of something metallic against metal. Not the settling groan of old hull plating, not the creak of thermal shift. This was movement. Merrick froze beside me, railgun angled down the corridor. His visor's HUD flickered, static crawling over his display. "That's not just air cycling," he muttered. Norin's breathing picked up in my ear. "We've got no power signatures ahead, no active systems. Whatever's moving isn't supposed to be moving." I kept my voice level. "Roden, you getting this?" His reply crackled over the comm. "Yeah, get back to the airlock. Now." The sound came again, closer this time. It was slow, dragging, like something heavy being pulled across a deck. My helmet mic picked up another noise under it, faint but unmistakable. Wet, like something breathing through water. We backed up the way we'd come. The station's corridors were a maze of skeletal support beams and hanging cables, every shadow twitching in the beam of my lamp. Merrick kept his weapon trained forward while I checked our rear. Then the first body hit the wall. It came from above, dropped from the open crawl space of a maintenance shaft. The corpse bounced against the bulkhead, drifting slowly in zero-G, its eyes staring past me. But before I could push it away, its jaw moved. Not like a man gasping for air, like something inside was testing the mechanics of its mouth. The corpse's head twitched toward me, eyes unblinking, lips peeling back to show teeth that were too clean, too white for a body that should have rotted decades ago. Merrick fired. The rail slug punched through its skull, sending a cloud of frozen blood and bone into the air. The body spun lazily, drifting out of our path. The scraping stopped. The silence was worse. We kept moving, faster now. Every doorway felt like a trap, every shadow a hiding place. My pulse pounded so hard I could hear it through my helmet. Halfway to the airlock, the station shuddered. Not a mild vibration, a full-body lurch, as if something massive had grabbed the hull and pushed. I hit the wall, magnet boots holding me steady, but Norin slammed into a dangling conduit and cursed. "Talk to me!" Roden's voice snapped in my ear. "Something's pushing the station," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. Get out of there before it decides to pull. We rounded a corner into the docking corridor. The airlock was 30 meters ahead. The Iron Wraith waited on the other side like a promise of safety. That's when I saw them. They were human. At least, they had been. But something had hollowed them out, replaced what they were with a stillness that was all wrong. Their skin was pale to the point of translucence, veins like black wires running under the surface. Their eyes were milky, pupils swallowed entirely, and their movements were smooth, deliberate, almost mechanical. There were 5 of them, standing in the corridor between us and the airlock. Not drifting, standing. Merrick raised his railgun. "Back off," he barked. They didn't. They just stared, heads tilting in unnatural sync, as if measuring us. Then the one in front opened its mouth and made a sound I'll never forget. A long, low hum, like metal vibrating in your bones. The others answered in perfect unison. Norin fired first, panicked. His shot tore through one's shoulder, but there was no blood, no cry of pain. The thing just staggered, then straightened again, head jerking toward him. "Merrick, take them," I shouted. The corridor lit with the blue flare of rail slugs, each one slamming into pale flesh and throwing fragments into the air. But it didn't matter. They kept coming. One of them moved faster than the rest, a blur in the half-light. It hit Merrick hard enough to lift him off his boots and slam him into the bulkhead. The impact cracked his visor. He screamed as something sharp slid into his chest. I grabbed him, hauling him back as the thing tried to wrench him away. It was strong, too strong for anything human. The muscles under its skin moved wrong, shifting in ways that made my stomach turn. "Roden, open the airlock!" I yelled. The Wraith's outer doors hissed open. The pressure differential yanked at us, pulling us toward safety, and pulling the things with us. One reached for me, fingers stretching far too long, joints bending backward with a sickening pop. I fired point blank into its face. The slug blew out the back of its skull, but its hand still closed on my arm. The grip was ice cold, bone-snapping strong. Norin slammed the emergency close on the inner hatch. The door slid shut between us and the creatures, severing the thing's fingers at my elbow. The dismembered digits twitched in my grip before going still. We collapsed into the Wraith. Merrick was pale, gasping, his suit bleeding air from the crack in his visor. Roden was already sealing the airlock and blowing the clamps. The moment we detached, the station moved. I saw it through the viewport, a massive shift, the whole structure rotating unnaturally as if something inside had shifted its weight. Then the docking ring we'd just left tore free, crumpling like paper, and vanished into the black below. We burned hard, engines screaming as the Wraith pulled away. No one spoke for a long time. Merrick didn't make it. Whatever that thing had stabbed him with, claw, bone, blade, it wasn't clean. His skin darkened around the wound, veins turning the same black I'd seen in those things. He convulsed once, twice, then went still. Roden didn't hesitate. He grabbed Merrick's body and dragged it to the secondary airlock. I moved to stop him, but he leveled his sidearm at me. "You want this ship to end up like that station? Step aside." The lock cycled. Merrick's body spun out into the void, his pale face lit by the Wraith's running lights for a brief second, before the darkness took him. Norin was shaking, hands still on the comm board. "What the hell were those things?" Roden didn't answer. He was staring at the severed fingers still on the deck, their skin already going translucent, the black veins spreading like spilled ink. I thought he'd throw them out with Merrick. Instead, he picked one up with a rag, sealed it in a containment jar, and locked it in the ship's secure hold. "That's human," I said quietly. His eyes met mine. That's what's left of human. The signal was gone. Either we'd destroyed the source, or the station had swallowed it whole. The planet below spun silently, oceans reflecting the faint starlight. I couldn't stop staring at it. There was no orbital traffic, no satellites, nothing but empty sky. But the longer I looked, the more I felt like something down there was looking back. "We're leaving," Roden said. "We still don't know what happened," I argued. "I know enough, and so do you." Norrin spoke up, voice trembling. "We're not the first ship to come here, are we?" Roden didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Every crew that crosses the line dies unless they turn back in time. The ones that don't, they become what you just saw." I thought of the milky eyes, the black veins, the inhuman strength. "How?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "No one knows. Could be a virus. Could be something in the air, in the water, in the dark. But it's human. That's why the map ends here. That's why every navigator knows to stay away." We set a course back toward mapped space. It should have been a straight run. But something followed us. It started with faint signals on the long-range scanners, echoes, pings that shouldn't have been there. Then came the shadows, shapes flickering across the viewport just outside the range of the running lights. By the second day, Norrin swore he saw movement inside the ship, just for a second, reflected in the glass of the bridge displays. We checked every compartment, sealed the airlocks, tripled the watch shifts. But at night, if you could call it that in the void, I heard it again. That scraping sound, getting closer. The scraping didn't stop. It was always faint, just at the edge of hearing. But it was there, in the vents, under the deck plating. Sometimes it came from the walls themselves, like the iron wraith had developed bones that shifted when we weren't looking. Roden pretended not to hear it. Norrin didn't. By the third day out of human space, his hands trembled so badly he could barely work the comm board. "Tell me you hear that," he whispered during my shift. His voice had the hollow edge of a man running on too little sleep and too much fear. "I hear it," I admitted. His eyes darted toward the sealed hold, the one where Roden had locked the severed fingers from the station. "It's coming from in there." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. But the truth was, I'd noticed the same thing. Every time the scraping came, it was louder when I was near the secure compartment. Roden kept the hold on isolation lockdown. Only he had the code. But that didn't mean I couldn't check the internal cams. When I pulled the feed onto my console, the containment jar sat exactly where he'd left it on the central workbench. The rag he'd used to pick up the fingers was gone, probably stowed somewhere else. I leaned closer. Something about the jar looked off. The fingers were longer, not by much, just enough that they pressed faintly against the glass. The pale skin had turned almost translucent, the black veins beneath shifting slowly, like they were alive. I cut the feed. We hit the halfway point back to mapped space on the fourth day. The beacons were still dead, but if we held course, we'd make contact with the first relay station in 30 hours. That was the plan. It lasted until Norrin vanished. He was there at the end of my shift, pale, jittery, muttering about needing coffee. When Merrick died, Norrin had been the quiet one, the one who kept his head down and avoided looking at the empty bunk in the crew quarters. But that morning, his bunk was empty too. No note, no personal gear gone. Just gone. We tore through the ship looking for him. Engine room, galley, maintenance crawl spaces. Nothing. Roden locked the bridge and set internal sensors to full sweep. "Tell me he didn't open that hold," Roden said. "I can't," I answered. The sweep came back with an anomaly. It wasn't in the crew quarters or the bridge. It was inside the vent network. We shut down life support circulation to the section. If Norrin was in there, he'd have to come out quick. But nothing happened. No movement, No response. Roden sent me in to check. I crawled through the maintenance hatch into the vent shaft, mag boots clanging against the steel. The air smelled faintly of metal and something sweeter, like overripe fruit. 10 meters in, I found it. The grating ahead was bent outward, and something dark stained the edges. It wasn't blood. It was thicker, tar-like, clinging to the metal in slow, viscous drips. I pulled my lamp up. Norrin was wedged in the corner of the shaft, his back to me. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, like his neck had been twisted until it almost broke. I reached for his shoulder. "Norrin." He turned. His face was pale to the point of glowing, veins black and writhing under the skin. His eyes were cloudy, the pupils swallowed whole. And his mouth stretched open far wider than it should have, teeth gleaming wet in the beam of my lamp. The hum started again, that same bone-deep vibration we'd heard on the station. It rattled through the vent walls and into my chest. I kicked off hard, shoving myself back down the shaft. Norrin moved faster than should have been possible, scraping toward me on hands and feet like some animal that had never been human. His fingers left black streaks wherever they touched. Roden's voice barked in my ear. "Get out now!" I burst from the hatch and slammed the seal shut. The moment it locked, something slammed into the other side, hard enough to dent the steel. We lost Norrin within the hour. Or maybe it's more accurate to say he wasn't Norrin anymore. The vent network carried his hum across the whole ship. It made sleep impossible. Merrick's empty bunk, Norrin's empty chair on the bridge, both felt like open graves now. Roden doubled our watch shifts. He carried his sidearm everywhere, but it didn't stop him from checking that jar in the secure hold every few hours. I caught him once. He stood over it, staring at the pale fingers pressed against the glass. They were almost whole hands now, the skin stretched over tendons that flexed when the hum pulsed. "You should have thrown that out with Merrick," I said, "and wasted the only proof we've got?" "Proof of what? That we brought this thing back with us?" He gave me a look that said the conversation was over. By the 6th day, the hum had changed. It was no longer just sound. It had rhythm, like a heartbeat, and it was coming from more than one place in the ship. The first time I saw one of them, it was in the cargo bay. Not Norrin. Not exactly. It was taller than he'd been, the limbs stretched unnaturally long, the joints bending wrong. Its skin was pale to the point of glowing under the bay lights, black veins shifting like oil beneath the surface. It stood in the far corner, head tilted, as if studying me. Then it stepped back into the shadows and was gone. I didn't tell Roden. There was no point. He'd either order me to shoot on sight or accuse me of seeing things. The next attack came 12 hours later. I was on bridge duty when the proximity alarms screamed. Something was moving outside the Wraith. No drive signature, no beacon. Just moving. Roden appeared at my side. "Put it on visual." The forward cam flickered, then resolved into a grainy image. Something clung to the hull just past the starboard wing. It was human-shaped, but it wasn't in a suit. The skin was raw and pale, frost clinging to its surface, hair streaming weightless in the void. Its hands, long finger-boned claws, gripped the plating as if it felt no cold, no vacuum. Then it looked straight into the cam. Roden didn't hesitate. "Full burn. Shake it off." The Wraith roared forward, the inertial dampeners groaning. The shape peeled away, spinning slowly into the black, but the proximity alarms kept going. More were on the hull. We cut gravity and powered the shields to full, hoping the energy surge would fry anything clinging to us. For a while, it worked. The cams showed several pale figures drifting away, their forms vanishing into the dark. But inside, the scraping got louder. Whatever was outside had been a distraction. By the time we reached the secure hold, the door was open. The jar was empty. The black veins had spread across the workbench like roots, pulsing faintly in time with the hum. And in the middle of it all stood Norin, or what was left of him, head tilted, pale eyes unblinking. He wasn't alone. The thing wearing Norin's face didn't blink. Its head tilted just enough for the light to catch the pale stretch of its skin. The black veins weren't under the skin anymore. They bulged like they were trying to crawl out. And behind him, in the shadows of the hold, were more shapes. Some I recognized. Marek's broad shoulders. The narrow frame of a man I'd never seen before, maybe from the station. One was too tall to be human, its head brushing the ceiling, but the same pale flesh clung to its elongated bones. Rodin's voice cut into my comm. "Back out. Seal the hold." Norin's mouth stretched into a grin that wasn't human. His teeth looked wrong. Too many. The hum started again, vibrating through the deck under my boots. This close, I could feel it in my ribs. It wasn't just sound. It was pressure, like my bones wanted to move in time with it. I stepped back. Slowly. One of the others, Marek, or what had been Marek, moved forward. Its gait was wrong, hips rolling too far, shoulders swaying like it was imitating how people walk without really understanding it. My hand found the pistol on my hip. "Don't!" It didn't stop. I fired. The slug caught it in the chest, knocking it back a step, but there was no spray of blood. The flesh around the hole rippled, like something inside was rearranging itself to fill the gap. Behind it, Norin's grin widened. I sealed the door. The locking bolt slammed home just as the first impact hit from the other side. The metal rang like a bell, the sound traveling all the way up my spine. "Secure hold's compromised," I said, moving fast down the corridor. "Whatever was in there, it's not contained anymore." Rodin swore under his breath. "Bridge, now!" The ship felt different on the way back. I couldn't see them, but I could hear them. Bare feet slapping against deck plates in the maintenance shafts. Claws, or fingers, dragging along bulkhead seams. The hum never stopped. It faded and swelled, like it was drawing breath. On the bridge, Rodin was at the weapons console, overriding safety locks. The autocannons were spooling up, their power signatures heavy enough to make the lights flicker. "You planning on shooting through the hull?" I asked. "If it comes to that?" "You do that and they'll have vacuum to work with. You think they can't survive that? We've seen them on the outside of the ship already." Rodin didn't look at me. "Then maybe we burn the whole damn ship down before they take it." The first attack came an hour later. We'd locked every door we could, but the Wraith wasn't built to keep things out from inside. The emergency alarms screamed from engineering first. By the time we got the cams up, the feed was a mess of static. But through the distortion, I caught flashes, pale limbs moving through the smoke, black-veined hands gripping the drive housing. Then the lights cut out. The hum surged, and I swear I could feel it in my teeth. "Backup power now," Rodin barked. I slammed the switch. Red emergency lights flooded the bridge, and the cams flickered back on just in time to catch Norin's pale, grinning face, leaning into one of them, his eyes rolling back until there was nothing but white. The next breach was in the crew quarters. We found what was left of Rakim, one of our deckhands, pinned to his own bunk. The flesh of his chest was gone, not torn, but smoothed over, like something had absorbed it cleanly. The sheets beneath him were soaked black instead of red. No sign of the things themselves. Just that hum, growing louder. Rodin stood over the body. "They're not killing for food." "Then what?" I asked. "They're building." I didn't ask what. I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. We pulled everyone left. Me, Roden, Givens from engineering, and Tice from gunnery, to the bridge. Sealed the hatches. Set the ship's internal defenses to auto-fire on any heat signatures outside the room. It bought us about 10 minutes. The first shot came from the corner. Not ours, theirs. A thin, jagged piece of metal, maybe a shard of plating, hurled hard enough to bury itself in Givens' throat. He went down without a sound, blood pooling too fast to stop. Then the vents opened. Hands came first, long, pale fingers curling over the grates. Then faces, one after another, pushing through the openings like water forcing itself through a crack. Tice emptied a mag into the first one through, the recoil hammering her shoulder. It dropped, but 2 more replaced it. The bridge turned into a brawl. Rail slugs tore through consoles, sparks spraying in the red light. One of them hit me from the side, hard enough to knock the air out of me. Its grip was ice cold, its breath, yes, breath, smelling like the inside of a sealed tomb. I jammed my pistol into its mouth and pulled the trigger. The back of its head blew out, splattering the bulkhead with something black and thick, but its body didn't let go until Roden shoved it off me with a boot. We sealed the vents with emergency bulkheads, the locking bolts groaning under the strain. The hum was deafening now, vibrating the deck under our feet. "They're not trying to take the bridge," Roden said. I looked at him. "Then what the hell are they doing?" He didn't answer. He was staring at the nav display. The course had changed. Somewhere in the fight, someone, or something, had fed new coordinates into the helm. We weren't heading for the mapped edge anymore. We were turning back, toward human space. I killed the autopilot. It came back online on its own. I locked it again. It overrode me. "They're flying the ship," I said, my mouth suddenly dry. "They want to go home," Roden muttered. The hum surged so hard the deck shook. One of the bulkhead bolts snapped with a metallic shriek. We had 2 choices: stay on the bridge and get overrun or abandon the Wraith. Roden chose the third option. "We vent the ship," he said, "everything. Drop the temp to hard vacuum. If they survive that, we're dead anyway." It took both of us to override the safeties. When the last lock disengaged, the air roared out of the Wraith, the sound ripping away the hum for the first time in days. The emergency seals slammed down across our suits, the HUDs flickering as the ship's life support flatlined. The cams showed the things flailing in the corridors, some sucked toward open hatches, others clawing at the deck to hold their ground. A few didn't move at all. They just stood there, letting the void wash over them. Then one of them looked straight into the cam and smiled. We didn't get all of them. By the time we restored atmosphere, 2 were gone entirely, sucked into space. The rest were still somewhere on the ship. The hum came back, weaker but not gone. And the helm, still locked on human space. The Wraith was dying in slow motion. You could feel it in the way the deck shuddered under each pulse of the engines. They weren't burning to break away anymore. They were burning to take us back. Back toward the black patch on the map. Back toward the planet with no lights. Back toward whatever hell had built the things hunting us. Roden stood over the helm, like a man guarding his own coffin. Every override code he punched in was wiped in seconds, replaced with the same locked coordinates. The nav AI wasn't fighting us. It was gone, overwritten by something else. "They've got control of the ship," I said. "They're not just on the ship," Roden replied. His voice was low, like saying it too loud might bring more of them out of the shadows. "They're in it. Every system we touch, they touch faster." "How?" He didn't answer. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he did, and saying it would make it real. We'd lost 2 more people overnight. Tice had been on gunnery watch when her feed cut to static. We found her in the port corridor, her body half absorbed into the wall plating, like the wraith had decided to grow around her. Givens. Well, there wasn't enough left to identify as a man. That left just me and Roden. 2 men against a ship full of monsters. "We can't fight them in here," Roden said. "We're rats in a cage." "Then what?" I asked. "We can't outshoot them, we can't outrun them, and we sure as hell can't pilot with them breathing down our necks." "We blow the cage." He was dead serious. The Wraith had 4 self-destruct charges in the engineering bay, meant for scuttling the ship if we were boarded by fleet or pirates. They weren't big enough to vaporize the hull, but they'd take out entire sections if placed right. "You want to blow the ship apart while we're still in it?" "I want to cut off every path between them and the helm. We isolate them to the aft section, then seal it and vent what's left. And if they're not all in the aft, then we die sooner." Getting to engineering meant crossing half the ship, through territory we didn't control. We armed up anyway. I took my pistol and a rail carbine. Roden had a shotgun built from illegal military parts that would tear a hole through a bulkhead. We killed every light in the forward corridors before we moved. Darkness was better than giving them a clear shot at us. The hum was everywhere now, low and steady, like the heartbeat of something sleeping just beneath the metal skin of the Wraith. We hit the first body 2 corridors in. Not human, not anymore. The pale skin had split down the middle of its chest, black tendrils spilling out like roots. They pulsed faintly, in time with the hum. Roden stepped over it without a glance. "They're dying," I said, though I didn't believe it. "No," he muttered. "They're changing." We heard the first one before we saw it, claws scraping along the bulkhead, slow and deliberate. I raised my carbine toward the corner, Roden holding back to cover our rear. Norrin stepped into view. Or what was left of him. His jaw hung loose, unhinged, the skin of his cheeks pulled so tight I could see the shape of his teeth through it. His eyes were pits of milky white, but they still found me. The hum surged. "Move!" Roden barked. I fired. The slug hit Norrin dead in the chest, knocking him back. He didn't stay down. Engineering was worse. The entire bay was coated in a black, veined growth, thick as tree roots, snaking across the floor and walls. It pulsed faintly, feeding into the machinery. The drive core's glow was dim, choked by the living mass wrapped around it. The smell hit me first, sweet, rotting, wet, like meat left out in the sun. "They've seated the ship," Roden said. "We cut this out, maybe we get control back." He moved toward the nearest destruct charge. I covered him, watching the vents. The hum in here was so loud my teeth buzzed. Then one of them dropped from the ceiling. It wasn't Norrin this time. It wasn't even human-shaped anymore. Its limbs were too long, its head elongated into something almost insect-like, the skin stretched to transparency over black sinew. Its mouth opened sideways, 4 sections peeling apart to show rows of teeth. It hit Roden before I could fire, claws tearing into his shoulder. He roared, jamming the shotgun into its midsection and firing point blank. The blast tore the thing in half, black ichor splattering across the deck. The pieces kept moving. We armed the first charge and set the timer for 10 minutes. That was the easy part. The hard part was making it to the other 3 placements without being pulled apart. By the time we set the last one, Roden was limping, his right arm hanging useless at his side. My carbine was almost dry. The hum had changed again. Faster now, more urgent. "They know," I said. "They've always known," Roden answered. We sprinted for the bridge. Halfway there, the ship itself seemed to fight us. Bulkheads sealed without warning. Doors locked in our faces. At one point, the corridor twisted into a new angle, a section of the Wraith I'd never seen before, like it had grown while we weren't looking. And in every shadow, they watched. Pale faces, black veins, white eyes. They didn't rush us. They didn't have to. The ship was taking us where they wanted. We hit the bridge with 30 seconds on the timer. Roden collapsed into the captain's chair, blood running down his side. "You ready for this?" I asked. "I was ready the second we crossed the line." The timer hit 0. The blast tore through the aft section, the sound deep and heavy even through the sealed bridge. Warning lights flared across every console. The Wraith shuddered violently, the hum stuttering for a second. Then it came back. Stronger. The nav console lit up. The coordinates changed again, not just back toward human space, but toward a specific point, the planet, the one under the dead station, the one with no lights. Roden slammed his fist into the console. "We didn't kill them, we fed them." The black growth spread across the bridge's forward bulkhead, pulsing faster now, veins creeping toward the helm. "We're out of time," I said. He looked at me. "Escape pod." There were only 2 left. We didn't argue. We just moved. The bridge hatch was half covered in black by the time we pushed through. The growth was warm under my gloves, like touching skin. We ran. The hum chased us through the corridors, not just sound anymore, voices under it, words I didn't understand. Or maybe I did, somewhere deep in the part of me that wanted to stop running and just listen. The first pod bay was gone, sealed under a mass of black-veined tissue. The second was still clear. Roden shoved me in first. "You're coming," I said. "Not with this arm," he said, nodding to the mess of blood and torn muscle. "I can't seal my suit. I'd be dead before the pod hits drift speed." "You can't stay here." His grin was sharp, humorless. "I can slow them down." I didn't get another word out before he hit the pod's launch. The hatch slammed shut, and the blast doors opened to the void. The last thing I saw was Roden turning back toward the black-covered corridor, shotgun in his good hand. Then the pod fired. I lost sight of the Iron Wraith within minutes. The pod's thrusters weren't meant for escape so much as survival. Get you away from whatever ship was dying under you and buy you a few hours of air. But every time I looked back, there was less of her in the starfield, until she was just another shadow. And yet I could still hear her. Not through the comms. Those were dead the second the pod's systems isolated from the Wraith. No, it was in my bones. The hum. The same low, vibrating thrum that had followed us since the station. Faint now, but there. Like it had marked me, and distance didn't matter. The nav display showed only one thing. The planet. No other stars, no beacons, no drift charts. Just a slow, steady pull toward the blue-green world hanging in the black. I tried overriding the pod's course. It didn't work. Manual thrusters cut out after 30 seconds, the controls locking back in place like the pod knew better than I did. The Wraith hadn't been taking me to mapped space. It had been bringing me here all along. As the planet grew in the viewport, I saw more detail. The oceans weren't blue so much as a deep, heavy green. The continents were dark, covered in forests so thick they looked like solid land masses. No lights, no cities, not even the faint glint of orbital debris. But the closer I got, the more wrong it looked. The forests moved. Not in the slow sway of wind, but in rolling patterns, like the skin of some massive animal shifting under its own muscles. The clouds didn't behave like clouds either. They formed perfect spirals, each one turning in sync with the others, like gears in an invisible machine. The pod didn't aim for the oceans or the forests. It took me toward the largest landmass, a jagged crescent of mountains. The descent burned through the atmosphere in a rush of heat and vibration. I braced for impact, but the pod slowed with unnatural precision, too smooth for dead systems and failing thrusters. Something was guiding it. When we touched down, The hatch opened on its own. The air was heavy. Not hot, not cold, just thick, like breathing through cloth. My suit's HFY flashed a dozen warnings about unknown particulates, then shut down completely. I was breathing the planet's air whether I wanted to or not. It didn't smell like a world should. No salt, no earth, no plants. Just that same sweet, rotting scent from the station. I stepped out. The ground wasn't rock. It was something darker, softer, that sank slightly under my boots. It pulsed. Not constantly, just every few seconds, like it was taking a breath. The sky was wrong, too. The clouds spiraled above me in perfect silence, but every few minutes they would pause, completely still, before resuming. And then I realized why everything felt alive. It was. The ground, the forests, even the air, all of it was part of the same thing. This wasn't a planet. It was a body, a single, living organism the size of a world. They found me within minutes. Not Norin, not Merrick, not even the shapes I'd seen on the Wraith. These were perfect. Human faces, healthy skin, clear eyes, men, women, even children. They moved with the same uncanny synchronicity as the things on the station, but they smiled when they saw me. One stepped forward, a man with my build, my height, my exact voice when he spoke. "You made it home." It wasn't mimicry. It was memory. My memory. I stepped back, pistol in my hand. "Stay away." He didn't stop. None of them did. "You were always coming here," my double said. "The map ends at human space because this is where it began. This is what we are." I fired. The slug went straight through his head. He didn't fall. The hole closed before the smoke cleared. "You don't need that," he said gently. "You just need to stop fighting." The ground pulsed harder. The air grew heavier. My chest ached with every breath. I realized with a kind of cold clarity that they weren't going to kill me. They were going to keep me. Not as prey, not as a prisoner, as part of them. The first tendril came from the ground, wrapping around my ankle before I could move. It wasn't rough. It was warm, almost comforting. Another coiled around my wrist, pulling me forward. I shot it, but the black ichor that spilled out only made the air thicker, the hum louder. The faces around me closed in, not rushing, not attacking, just moving closer, smiling like they were welcoming a brother home. "You've been running from yourself," my double said. "Every navigator knows why the map ends here. It's not to keep you out, it's to keep you from remembering." The tendrils pulled harder. The hum was in my skull now, behind my eyes. I saw flashes, the station, the Wraith, the pale figures, but not as enemies, as fragments of something larger, pieces scattered and left to drift until they could be brought back. Brought back to this. To me. I tried to fight. I kicked, tore free of one tendril, broke another with the butt of my pistol. But for everyone I destroyed, 2 more wrapped around me. The faces didn't change. They didn't get angry. They didn't even blink. The last thing I saw before the ground took me was the sky, the clouds spiraling faster now, the entire world pulsing in perfect rhythm with my heartbeat. Then the hum swallowed everything. I woke to silence. No hum, no weight in my chest. I was standing on a platform overlooking an endless sea of black-veined growth. It stretched to the horizon in all directions, pulsing faintly under a sky filled with those perfect spirals. Beside me stood Roden, whole, uninjured, smiling. "You finally stopped running," he said. "What is this?" "It's us," he said simply. "All of us, every ship that crosses the line, every man who hears the call. We're not lost. We're home." I looked out over the living sea. Shapes moved within it, human, alien, things I couldn't name, all moving in the same perfect rhythm. And somewhere deep inside me, I felt it too. There's no escaping human space. That's why the map ends here. Not because it's dangerous, because once you arrive, you never leave. You're going to hear the stories sooner or later. They'll tell you the map ends at human space because it's unmapped, because it's dangerous, because no one's made it back to chart it. They'll lean in close, over drinks, and give you names of ships that vanished there. Maybe ships you've worked with, men you've traded with. You'll think it's just spacer superstition. You'll think, I've flown through pirate sieges, asteroid storms, war zones. I can handle one more patch of black. That's what I thought. Here's the truth. The map ends at human space because that's where it begins. That black patch isn't empty. It's full. So full you can't imagine it until you're inside it. It's alive. Every star, every planet, every inch of void. And it remembers you. Once you cross the line, it finds you, puts its hum in your bones, its breath in your lungs. You'll see it in the eyes of your crew before you see it in your own. That soft, far-away look like they've already heard the voice calling them home. You can't fight it, not for long. Some try. Most don't bother. So when you're plotting a course and you see that sharp edge on your nav chart, that hard cut where the stars just stop, don't wonder what's beyond it. Don't think you're the one who'll make it back with a story, because the story never makes it back. Only you do, and you won't be you anymore.